With the average new car in the United States costing nearly $50,000, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are looking for a fantastic budget option. On a different note, the instability of current gas prices makes a lot of people want to move away from fossil fuels and maybe towards something electric. And to solve those two problems, Chevy has brought back the Bolt for 2027 and 2027 only. Yes, you heard that right. Chevy brought back one of its most beloved models and then announced that they would kill it off just 18 months later. So get it while you can, because this is the cheapest new electric car you can buy. Hey, hold on, wait a second. Isn't the new Slate electric pickup truck the cheapest EV you can buy? Okay, well, first off, you're comparing a vehicle in a completely different segment to this. Second off, it doesn't have back seats, it doesn't have power windows, power mirrors, heated seats, or any of the amenities that this has, and it's not even out yet. So I don't care about your opinion, you can just go away. Oh, okay. Let's pull the 2027 Bolt into the studio, talk about some of its features and oddities, show you some of its pricing and trim levels, take it on a drive, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on Chevy's take on an everyman's electric car. All right, let's start the tour up front on the 2027 Chevrolet Bolt. Starting up front with the front end styling on the 2027 Chevrolet Bolt. Up here you have your daytime running light and it doubles as your turn signal when you indicate. Below that, in a semi-conjoined setup, you do have your LED high beam and low beam. They do have automatic high beam function, but not matrix support. Below that you have a piano black plastic square. It's not square, it's a triangle, and it's a little hard to tell on this particular model because it is painted black, but you can see right here, this trim piece is piano black, unlike the previous gen Bolt EUV. This is piano black, and this lower section is piano black. This middle bit is body color. Speaking of black, you have a blacked out Chevy bow tie badge. Right here you have a camera for your 360-degree parking cameras. Down here you have your lower front fascia. You do have some cooling for your battery. Behind this little cover is where you would insert the towing eyelet to pull it onto a flatbed. Then here you have some non-piano black, just basic black plastic, which is good because this is a low area that's gonna scrape often, so it's good that it's a little more durable. Some more air vents, and that's pretty much it for the front end. Fairly basic, but it looks good and it fits the car. Let's go under the hood to talk about the powertrain. Under the hood in the Bolt, you do not have a front trunk, but you still can open this. You just have a traditional hood latch inside the vehicle. Unlike its brother, the Equinox EV, though, this is not a double pull hood latch. You still have to fiddle around with a secondary latch underneath the hood. And it does not have hood struts, but that makes sense because you're never gonna really open this unless you need to fill up your washer fluid. Let's come in a little closer and talk about the specs. Under the hood in the 2027 Chevy Bolt, you will find the only electric motor available in the Bolt. You can't get all-wheel drive, so you won't get a dual motor setup. This one, or actually all of them, have the same permanent magnet front electric motor. It makes 210 horsepower and 169 pound-feet of torque. That might seem like a lot less than the outgoing Bolt, but this does have a more aggressive gear reduction, so it's 11.6 to 1 versus 7 to 1 on the outgoing Bolt, which means it's gonna actually have the same 0 to 60 time of about 6.7 to 6.8 seconds, and it does have the same 93 mile an hour electronically limited top speed. This motor is shared with the Equinox EV, but the drive unit itself is different because of A, the gear reduction, and B, it does have a silicon carbide inverter for improved efficiency at low power output. The Equinox EV does not have that. And just like its sibling, it does have a physical parking pawl inside the gearbox, so it will rock back and forth a little bit when you come to a stop and put the vehicle into park. But if you park on a steep enough hill, the rear parking brake will automatically engage, so it won't put too much stress on the gearbox. Other things to note under here, you do have your coolant bottle, your washer fluid reservoir, your brake fluid, your lead acid 12-volt battery, your heat pump, which improves efficiency in the wintertime for cabin and battery cooling, the radiator, which is part of that cooling system, and not much else. There's actually not a lot of additional space under here, which means they did a pretty decent job with packaging, unlike in the Equinox EV where there was a bit more wasted space, which made me more inclined to harp on it for not having a front trunk. But since this is a lot cheaper than that and there's not a lot of extra space in here anyway, it makes sense why there's no frunk. Let's move down to the tires and wheels and talk about the suspension setup. That was loud. Up front, you have a 17-inch gloss black alloy wheel. This is standard on RS, but on the LT trim, you have the same wheel design. It's just basic silver, however. You can get a machined face gloss black alloy wheel on the LT trim as an option, but standard, it is still just a silver alloy wheel, but they are all the same size and they are all the same design. These wheels are wrapped in a 215/50 R17 Michelin E primacy. They're fairly narrow, but the car's not that heavy, so it works perfectly well for this vehicle, and these should be very very easy to find because that's not an especially big nor expensive tire size, so that should be nice and easy to replace. And underneath this wheel, you do have a 276 millimeter or 11-inch front rotor with a single piston front caliper, and you do have a McPherson strut front suspension architecture. Let's move to the rear. And in the back of the new 2027 Bolt, you have the same wheel and tires up front, so you can rotate these front to back. The brakes underneath these wheels are a 264 millimeter rotor, so slightly smaller than the one up front, that is 10 inches. And you do have a single piston caliper with an electronic parking brake. Let's cut to the braking test and see how well the 2027 Bolt can brake from 60 miles an hour. Okay, time for the braking test. We're gonna do a 60 to 0 mile an hour full ABS braking test. 60 to 0 in 3, 2, 1. All right, what did we get? Did it even work? 60 to 0, 3.5, or 3.45 seconds, and distance 145.53 feet. Welcome back from the braking test. It actually stops pretty decent. It's honestly fighting the tire more than the weight because this doesn't actually weigh that much. I'll talk about that in a second. In the rear, you do have a torsion beam style rear suspension, so it's not fully independent like a multi-link setup would be on a bigger vehicle, but it gets the job done and it's super cheap and easy to produce. So this does actually have a little bit stiffer ride quality than some other electric cars, but it does handle better because of that torsion beam rear end because it doesn't roll as much in the corners. Let's talk about the sizing, payload, ground clearance, and all the other specs that you need to know about the 2027 Bolt. Before we talk about the battery and charging, let's actually talk about the dimensions of this car. Now, this is the smallest vehicle that I think Chevy makes, period. It might be bigger than the Trailblazer, but the Trailblazer is the smallest gas offering, at least. And that's the most comparable vehicle to this. Maybe the Chevy Trax is more comparable, but the Trax is honestly a little bit bigger, and the Trailblazer fits the dimensions of this a little bit more, but it is available with all-wheel drive, unlike the Bolt, and the Trax is not available with all-wheel drive. So in terms of capabilities, the Trax is pretty close, but in terms of size, the Trailblazer is more close to this. Anyway, the dimensions of the new Bolt are as follows. You do have a 105.3-inch wheelbase. The length of the vehicle is 169.6 inches. The width without the mirrors is 69.7. It is 80.1 with the mirrors. You do have a total height of 63.9 inches with the roof rails and the antenna. You do have a curb weight of 3,776 pounds on the LT trim. It is 3,807 on the RS trim, which is the one you see here. You do have a 5.6-inch ground clearance figure and a payload of 873 pounds for every Chevy Bolt. It's not a big vehicle. This is actually a little bit smaller than most of the subcompact crossovers. Think Hyundai Venue, Nissan Kicks, Chevy Trax, something like that. This is a little bit more close to something like a hatchback, so think Ford Focus, Volkswagen Golf, etc. Honestly, I would classify this as a hatchback. I don't really think it's a crossover because it's not available with all-wheel drive. So if you were to ask me, this is a hatchback. I guess not lifted. It's a slightly taller hatchback. I think it fits that class more than the compact crossover class. Let's talk about the battery and charging on the 2027 Bolt, which is where this car excels, surprisingly, considering what the old Bolt used to be. Moving around to the front left fender on the Chevy Bolt, you will find the charge port. Now, this is not the best place for a charge port, but it is all right. And if you do a lot of level 2 charging, which in my opinion is the best way to charge an electric car, this is actually really convenient because you can just get out, walk right over to the charge port, plug it in. You don't have to walk all the way around to the other side of the vehicle to plug it in once you get out because it's literally 3 inches away from the driver door. The only problem with this charge port location is if you are charging at, let's say, a V3 Tesla supercharger with short cables, it's going to be difficult to get that cable to reach without double parking and blocking 2 stalls, so that's a little bit unfortunate. The charge port itself is manually operated. You just press right here and the door will open, although I will say it is a little bit difficult to get the door to close again. You have to put a lot of force on it for the little plunger to retract properly, but once you open it up, you'll notice that you actually have a NACS port, which is a welcome addition to the 2027 Bolt. What is not a welcome addition is the lack of a charge port light. Now, you can get one, but it costs $450 for a simple ring light around the charge port. That is ridiculous for a $5 component. Now, if you don't get that option, which you shouldn't because it's overpriced, there is a charge indicator light on the dashboard on every Bolt. So even if you don't get that option, you still have an indicator to let you know that the car is charging, but you don't have a light. So if it's dark out, you can't see where the charge port is at night, which is a bit unfortunate. Let's talk about the actual charging capabilities of this vehicle, starting off with the AC onboard charger, which is an 11.5 kilowatt or 48 amp unit. This can also output 9.6 kilowatts out of the charge port to power your house, but you have to get a proprietary GM Energy charge station, which costs like $5,000 or $6,000 to install and buy, which is really expensive considering that the base price on this is 28 grand. So that's not really worth it to me, but you can do it if you want to. When it comes to DC fast charging, that is the biggest upgrade to the 2027 Bolt, the DC fast charge rate. This can peak at over 150 kilowatts, nearly 160 in certain scenarios. And this allows this battery to charge from 10 to 80% in 26 minutes, which is blazingly fast compared to the nearly an hour and 10 minute 10 to 80% charge time on the outgoing Bolt, which only maxed out at 55 kilowatts and had a much worse charging curve. Now let's actually talk about the battery pack itself. It is finally LFP. LFP stands for lithium iron phosphate, and these cells are made by CATL, which means they are imported from China, which might be why GM is only building this for a couple months, because there is import fees and all that stuff. But I think they are going to switch to LG cells, which are going to be made in the United States, and they will still be LFP, so that sounds nice. When it comes to capacity, this has 65 kilowatt hours of capacity quoted by GM. It's actually a little bit more than that. It's closer to like 69 kilowatt hours, but we'll just say 65 for simplicity. This has a 262 mile EPA estimated range. I've gotten closer to 210 in the real world, so I think it's safe to say that the range on this vehicle is going to be anywhere from 200 to 250 miles, depending on the situation. And honestly, for the price point, considering all the other used EVs that compete with this in a similar price bracket, this has equivalent range, if not longer range, than a lot of the used electric cars on the market. Think used Model 3, Model Y. It's pretty similar to one of those with degradation, and to be honest, the efficiency of this thing at low speeds means that the city range is actually really good. This can get over 280 miles on the city, so if you're looking for a nice city car, this has plenty of range. Overall, the battery pack is a huge upgrade, but let's talk about that caveat. You should not charge these to 100% every single day. Let me explain, because this is going to be confusing. Welcome to the whiteboard. I'm going to do a brief explanation on what LFP batteries mean for your daily usage habits, their pros, their cons, and some other information. So let's start off with what LFP actually stands for. Well, it stands for lithium iron phosphate, because lithium on the periodic table is obviously Li, iron is Fe, and phosphate is actually not really in LFP batteries. Phosphate is just a term to describe the chemical makeup of an LFP battery. The only metals in an LFP battery are lithium and iron. Compare that to a high nickel cell, which would be NCM or NCA, or sometimes even NCMA. You can see that they have nickel, cobalt, manganese, or nickel, cobalt, aluminum, and these still do have lithium in them. These actually have a lot more rare earth metals in them that you need to mine out of the ground, and that means they cost a lot more to manufacture compared to an LFP cell. The other advantages of LFP cells include cycle life. Now, the cycle life of an LFP cell is usually around 3,000 to 5,000 cycles before they drop to 80% state of health. Compare that to a high nickel chemistry, it's around 1,000 cycles before it gets to the same 80% state of health. This means if you have a car with 200 miles of range, you will see 80% state of health at 200,000 miles on a high nickel chemistry battery, but it could be 600 to 1,000,000 miles before an LFP cell degrades to that same point. So an LFP car will last a lot longer and retain its battery health a lot better than a high nickel chemistry battery. Now, the big issue for me when it comes to LFP cells is the voltage discharge curve. So if I draw a graph like this is 0%, this is 100%, this is, let's say, 2.5 volts, and this up here is 4.5 volts. And I'm going to use the blue line to demonstrate LFP. I'm going to use the green line to demonstrate NCM. So an NCM battery starts at about 2.8 volts completely dead. It'll come up pretty quickly and linearly increase until it reaches 4.5 volts at the very end of its charging cycle. If you compare this to an LFP cell, which starts at about 2.7 volts completely dead, it comes up really quickly, but then then it just holds voltage for a long time until you get to 100%, and then it goes boop, and then just spikes at the very end. The reason why manufacturers have you charge an LFP battery to 100% is to calibrate the BMS. It is not for the longevity of the cell. When you reach 100%, the BMS goes, hey, I'm at 100%, I saw the voltage spike. Let's reset the state of charge calculation so we can track it more accurately. And then what it'll do from there is as you drive, it'll use what's called Coulomb counting to estimate the energy usage from the vehicle and estimate your state of charge. What it's not actually doing while you're driving is actually measuring the state of charge, and that's why you have to full charge them occasionally to calibrate the BMS. If you charge it to, let's say, 80% every day, well, you can see this voltage curve is so flat that it could be at 80, 20, 50, it could be anywhere in there even though it was charged to 80%. And this is a problem if you do a lot of driving where you charge back to back, let's say on a road trip, and you don't charge to 100% very often. That means the BMS could get out of sync with where the battery actually is in its state of charge range, and you could arrive with way more energy in the pack that you couldn't actually use because the car read low state of charge, or you could actually run out of charge before you get to your destination because the car thought you had more than you actually did. Keep that in mind though, because I'm going to explain something very briefly. Now, like I just mentioned, all the manufacturers recommend charging to 100% every single day. And in my opinion, this is not what you should do, because just like every other battery, LFP batteries do not like being full charged and sitting at 100% because that stresses the chemical structure of the battery. Basically, all you need to know is when a battery is fully charged, it's more stressed than when it's halfway charged or even 80% charged. In my opinion, what you should do to extend the longevity of your LFP car is charge to 80% 6 days out of the week, and then charge to 100% for 1 day out of the week. So you do have the opportunity to calibrate the battery at 100%, but you're not compromising on the health of your battery by leaving it at 100% every single day. You charge it to 80% and it'll extend the lifespan of your battery. Battery in your electric car is the most expensive component in an EV, so it's best to prioritize longevity over everything else. Make sure you full charge at least once a week and then charge to 80% the rest of the days of the week, unlike what GM actually says. That's just my personal recommendation. You don't have to follow it, but that's my thought on LFP batteries. That's enough battery talk. Let's get inside the Chevy Bolt EV and talk about the interior. Before we hop inside the 2027 Bolt, let's talk about the locks and keys. Now, there is a phone app, but it does not support phone as a key, so you can't just walk up with the phone in your pocket and unlock the door. You have to carry the key fob, but the key fob does feel pretty decent. It has lock, unlock, panic, and remote start, and you can do basically all of those functions from the app as well, except drive the car, which kind of makes the app a little bit redundant in my opinion, but it's there if you want it. Up here, you do have some black roof rails. These are standard on RS trims, but are optional on LT trims. You do have regular door handles, which you just can pull on to unlock the door instead of having to power fold out like the Equinox EV, and you just have a button to lock and unlock the doors from the outside. Over here, you have some mirrors, which are manual fold, and they are body color skull caps. It's just black paint on this vehicle, so it's hard to tell. No power folding is available. You do have blind spot monitoring as standard across the board, and on the bottom you do have little cameras for your 360-degree camera system, which is an option. But if you spec that option, it actually does include a dash cam function like a Tesla. So you can plug in a USB stick into the USB in the center console of the Chevy Bolt, and it will record footage while you're driving to that USB stick. So if you get into an accident, you can pull the footage off it and watch it on your computer. And it does have side, front, rear, and windshield angles as well. At least I think so. Maybe it doesn't have the front and just the windshield, but it has one of the two. Not exactly sure which. The only drawback to this is that it does not record while you are parked, and you have to format the USB stick before putting it in the car. The car can't format it for some reason. I'm not sure why, but having that feature is a nice addition for such an inexpensive vehicle. What's weird is that no other GM product has it, and the cheapest electric vehicle that GM offers does. That's interesting. Anyway, let's hop inside and talk about the interior. Hopping into the driver's seat of the 2027 Chevy Bolt, the door handle actually has a pretty good action to it, and the door is fairly weighty, and the thunk, not too bad for a $28,000 car. Hopping inside and closing the door, and the car automatically starts up because there is no start-stop button in the Chevy Bolt. You can just get in and close the door and it'll start up, or you can place your foot on the brake pedal and it'll do the same thing. When you want to shut the vehicle off, you can just get out and close the door and it'll shut off automatically. Or if it doesn't work, you can press this vehicle off button on the central touchscreen. And if you want the vehicle to remain on for 60 minutes after you leave, you can press another button on the touchscreen and it'll do exactly that. So if you want to keep your climate control running for a dog or another pet that you may have in the vehicle. When you get in and start the vehicle, you will notice that there is a red LED projected up onto the windshield to act as an alert measure to the driver to let you know that maybe you should hit the brake pedal instead of hitting that obstacle. The seat will also vibrate when that light is triggered as an additional sense to warn the driver of an incoming collision. Let's start over here on the door panel. You do have hard plastics up here and down low, although the armrest is semi-padded, so at least the touch points are pretty good. You do have ambient lighting right above this textured gray trim. You have your lock and unlock controls, your door handle. Down here you have your window switches. You have automatic down for all 4 windows, but only automatic up for the driver window. You have power mirror controls, and down here you have some more cubby storage for a water bottle and stuff like that. Over here on the left of the gauge cluster, you do have an air vent for the window. You have your park brake, your button for your lane keep assist, your heated steering wheel control, your gauge cluster dimmer, and your central screen dimmer. And that's basically it. Behind the steering wheel, you do have an 11-inch driver information display, and you do have several different views. If you hold down on this scroll wheel, you can change it from single gauge, dual gauge, Google Maps, driver assistance, or a clean view. And the Google Maps view actually takes over the whole screen and is incredibly useful if you don't want to occupy your central screen with your Google Maps. Over here to the left of the steering column, you do have your turn signal stock, and this does have your wiper control on them. You just twist this little dial to turn on your wipers, and this does have rain sensing wipers, so if you want that feature, this does have that, although it is optional. You also do have your rear wiper control on the same stock. On the right side of the steering column, you do have your shifter stock, so you can go into drive, neutral, and reverse and press the N for park. Your steering column itself is 4-way manual adjust. You pull down a little lever down here, and then you can adjust it up and down and in and out to get your ideal driving position. The steering wheel itself is leather wrapped and heated across the board, except on the very base trim, so that's the LT if you don't get a comfort package, but the comfort package doesn't cost that much. And I haven't actually seen any bolts available without that package. I think it might be mandatory, even though you can spec it on the configurator, which is interesting. On the steering wheel itself, you do have your buttons for cruise control. Every Bolt has adaptive cruise control, and it works very well. And you can get Super Cruise on the Bolt. You'll have your little LED indicator light for Super Cruise on the steering wheel if you do get that option. It is part of a nearly $5,000 package though, so maybe that's not the best value on such a cost-effective vehicle, but it does give you other things than just that. That's just one of the primary features of that package. On the right of the steering wheel, you have your media controls. You have your Google Voice Assistant button, the button to cycle through your favorited radio stations, your audio controls, your phone controls, and on the back of the steering wheel, you have your volume, and on the other side of the steering wheel, you have an additional change track button for your favorited presets. And in the center of the steering wheel, you have the horn. That's not a very good horn. Well, it is a cheap vehicle, so I guess it gets a pass. Moving to the center of the dashboard, you have your 11.3-inch central infotainment screen. It does not have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but it does have built-in Google, so you have Google Maps, Google Play, and Google Assistant built in. This screen does also have a Wi-Fi hotspot, and like I mentioned before, it does have Google Play compatibility, so you can download your streaming services directly to this central screen to listen to it on your 6-speaker standard audio system. Let's cut to the sound system test and see how that sounds. All right, time for the sound system test. This has a 6-speaker audio system. I got the house music loaded up because it's very easy to use for sound system test because it's got bass treble and all that jazz, so let's click play. Initial thoughts, not the best sound system, but it is serviceable, and for the price of the car, you really can't complain. It sounds actually pretty decent. Not the best sound system in the world, but it has more bass than I would expect for only being 6 speakers with no subwoofer once you crank it. It is a little rattly, but you get what you pay for in the Chevy Bolt. Alright, welcome back from the sound system test. Below that central touchscreen, you do have your physical climate controls, which is nice to see. You have a temperature dial, a fan speed dial. It is only single zone, and you cannot get dual zone climate on the Bolt, which is a little bit unfortunate. However, you can get heated and ventilated seats on the RS trim and on the LT trim as an additional option. Below that, you have your wireless charger, another little cubby beside it, another cubby below it, and down here in this big open section, you have a lot of storage for a purse or maybe a handbag, and you can change this little divider to add an additional cup holder, 2 USB-C ports, a cigarette style power outlet. In the middle here, you do have even more adjustable cup holdery things. So if you want more storage, you can move these little fins around and have cup holders or just a generalized center console storage. You could remove these if you want, throw them in the trash, I don't care. In the center here, you do have a pretty deep center console storage that can hold a decent amount of stuff. And over here, you do have a nice cubby with more ambient lighting, and that ambient lighting is controlled through the central infotainment system. You can choose basically any color you want, as you can see right here. Pretty nice ambient lighting. That is optional on LT trim, but standard on RS. Below that, you have 2 more cubbies, your glove box. Let's talk about the seats in this vehicle. Now, they are not the most comfortable thing. They are a little bit flat and a little bit narrow, but it is what it is for such a basic vehicle. The seat material is what GM calls Evotex. It is like a fake leatherette. It is perforated, so these are heated and ventilated like I mentioned before. Passenger seat is 6-way manual adjust, as you can see here, so you can go forward and backward, although it is a little bit stiff, like that. And you can go up and down with it and recline, but it is manual on every trim. The driver's seat is power adjust. It is 8-way power adjust, so it does have power lumbar support, although it is only in and out, not up and down. The very base model of the Bolt has a 6-way manual adjust seat. If you get the comfort package on the LT trim, you do get that 8-way power adjust seat. And if you get that package, the front 2 seats are heated. However, if you do get that package on the LT trim, you have cloth seats. You can get heated and ventilated seats on the LT trim, but then they will be the Evotex. So if you get cloth, they're not going to be ventilated, obviously. In my opinion, the seats are not the most comfortable thing. I've heard a lot of people say that they like the GM seats, but they're honestly kind of flat and not the most supportive, so make of that what you will. But for a fairly inexpensive vehicle, I can forgive it. Up here in the center, you do have a camera rear view mirror, which is optionable on the LT and RS, although I think on RS it is standard. You can, of course, adjust the brightness of this camera mirror. You can adjust the zoom, and you can adjust the tilt without actually having to move the mirror housing itself. You also do have your sun visors. They do slide, but they do not have any sort of vanity lighting in the mirrors, which is a little bit unfortunate. Over here, you have your incandescent dome lights, your OnStar controls, and the switch for your panoramic sunroof, which is an optional extra on the Bolt. It costs about $1,700, and it is a fairly large piece of glass, although only about half of it opens. And to be fair, I think it's nice that they offer a glass sunroof in a vehicle at this price, but if it were my choice, I would skip it because I think it adds a lot of cost and complexity to such a simple, basic vehicle. But, you know, you get what you pay for, and if you want a sunroof, it's there. Overall, the interior in this thing is pretty nice for the price. Like, you have good ambient lighting, the climate control works great, you have good technology other than the lack of Apple CarPlay, but honestly, I don't think that's a big deal because you can download your streaming services directly to the infotainment system and listen to them on the sound system, so that's really the only real reason that you would want Apple CarPlay. And for those of you complaining that you can't get Waze on it, you actually can, so shut up. Let's move into the back seats and talk about the rear space. Hopping into the rear seat of the 2027 Bolt, you'll actually realize that the space back here is not bad at all for the size of the vehicle. I'm 6'2", and my head does touch the ceiling, but my legs have plenty of room, and the thigh support is actually better than in the Equinox EV, and the floor is completely flat. Now, it was in the Equinox EV too, but this does mean that the middle seat is actually fairly usable as long as you put a fairly skinny person in that middle seat. The door is basically the same as up front, except you don't have the same trim color as up front, and there's no ambient lighting in the rear door, but other than that, it's basically the same design. And the rear window does roll all the way down, which is nice to see, so you can rest your arm on the windowsill and it won't puncture your skin. Up here, you do have an oh shit handle, a coat hook, and an incandescent dome light, which means your hand gets kind of hot when you're holding on to this grab handle if the dome light's on. Back here, you do have 2 USB-C ports on the back of the center console, no air vents, however. In the middle, you do have a flip-down armrest with 2 cup holders, although to be fair, the distance between the armrest and the door is a little bit narrow, so it's not the most comfortable. This car is fairly narrow, so Keep that in mind. The headrests do flip up and down for better rear visibility, and the rear seats are the same leatherette as up front, and they are perforated, but they are not heated nor ventilated. But honestly, at this price point, I can't really complain about that too much. And you do have ISOFIX anchor points in both the outer two seats, so that works well, although it does not have the same easy access covers as the Equinox EV, so that's a little bit unfortunate. However, you do have a center headrest, which does raise up and down, although you do have to do it more inconveniently than the outer two headrests, but it does offer that feature. And so if you need to put someone in this middle seat, you can do it because the floor is flat enough. But for 3 adults back here, I wouldn't squeeze 3 people in the back seat of this car. This is basically a 4.5 seater. So obviously it can fit 5, and it does have 5 seat belts, but 4.5 people or 5 adults and a child is realistically all I would squeeze back here. Let's move on to the cargo area and talk about the space back there, because that's kind of the biggest drawback for me when it comes to the Chevy Bolt. All right, before we hop into the cargo area of the 2027 Bolt, let's talk about the rear end styling. And I actually think they've done a pretty good job on the rear end styling of this vehicle. I actually like it. It does got a little bit of a bubble butt going on down there, but it works well for the size of the car, and I think it actually looks pretty good. And they made the crucial improvement of moving the brake light and turn signal up to a reasonable position on the vehicle. The outgoing Bolt had the brake light and turn signal way down here in the bumper, and that was kind of hard to see. So now they've just turned that into a reflector and moved the brake light and turn signal up here. Unfortunately, they have not made it amber. The turn signal is shared with the brake light and it flashes red like a lot of other US direct market vehicles do. I don't like it when automakers do that. I understand why they do it, because it's cheaper to design it that way and it's a little less safe, but honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference. You do have your rear wiper. This one is missing a cover for the rear wiper spindle, so ignore that. Up here, you do have a rear duck lip spoiler, which actually looks pretty good on this Bolt. Makes it look a little bit more hot hatchy. Right here, you have a rear Chimsel style third brake light. Up here, you do have your camera for your rear view mirror and a washer jet for that rear view mirror camera. Down here, below the Chevy bow tie, you have your actual reversing camera, license plate bracket with your license plate lights, and the license plate lights are LED, which is nice to see. Over here you have your Bolt badge, which is blacked out, your RS badge, parking sensors, and that is standard, at least on the rear. Down here you do have black plastic cladding, reflectors, a little cover for a towing eyelet, and your reverse light is way down here in the lower bumper, but it actually does work pretty well. And the sound it plays in reverse is pretty angelic sounding. All right, opening up the cargo area on the 2027 Bolt. You do not have a power liftgate, and that is standard across the board. You can't get a power liftgate, but the liftgate is fairly light and it opens fairly easily with these hydraulic gas struts. And the liftgate height is actually pretty decent. My head just barely hits it, but being 6'2", I think the majority of people wouldn't have a problem with that. And you do have a nice handle here to close it, or you can just reach on the paint. It doesn't really matter too much. Back here you have 16.2 cubic feet of cargo area with the seats up, and below this floor you actually have a ton of underfloor storage, and even more if you lift up this second panel, and that's where your EVSC, your tire inflator and sealant, and your towing eyelet is stored. You also have a nice GM floor mat. This is an option. You do have an LED cargo light, 2 little tie-down points, a slot where you can put the included cargo cover. This one was just removed from the vehicle, so that's why it doesn't have it. But I think all Bolts should come with the cargo cover. And if you need even more space, you can get up to 56.3 cubic feet of cargo space with the seats folded down, and they do fold nearly completely flat. The reason why that one's not folding flat is I think there's something in the seat blocking it right now. But the seats do fold completely flat, so you do have a lot of rear cargo space. And so if you need to haul a bunch of extra junk in your Bolt, you can do it. And it is nice because it is a hatchback, so it has that flexibility. Although this is actually fairly shallow, like the gap between the roof and the floor, so keep that in mind. But for the size of the vehicle and for the price, this has a decent amount of cargo volume, but if you were asking me, I would wish it'd have a little more trunk space and a little bit less back seat room, but maybe that's just my opinion. Let's talk about the pricing and trim levels on the Chevy Bolt and show you which one you should actually buy. And in my opinion, it's probably better to keep it basic. Let's talk about the pricing and trim levels on the 2027 Bolt. There are 2 trims, the LT and the RS trim. Now, both of these trim levels can have the exact same feature set, but the LT trim has a lot less features as standard. It does not have heated front seats, it doesn't have leather, it doesn't have a heated leather wrap steering wheel, no camera rear view mirror as standard, etc, etc. But if you want all those features, you can get them on the LT. You just have to spec them in the options menu, which I will go over shortly. And realistically, the only thing you gain by going from LT to RS in terms of feature availability is gloss black alloy wheels and a subtle appearance
package on the front end of the vehicle, like a different lower front fascia, as you can see right here. It's got a little bit different design with an RS badge, some different wheels, and it comes with gloss black roof rails as standard, but that's about it. It's basically the same car, just with a minor style package. If you go into the options menu on the LT trim, you have the comfort package, which will add an 8-way power driver's seat, the heated front seats, and a heated leather-wrapped steering wheel, as well as an auto-dimmable interior mirror. Now, this does not have leather seating if you get this package, but for only $1,000, I think it's basically a necessity to have that. And if you look in Chevy's inventory, basically every single Bolt has this package, so that is nice to see. You can also get the EvoTex package, which will add leather seats, or pleather, whatever you want to call it, and it adds ventilation to those front seats, although you have to get the comfort package before it, so you have to get both of them. You can't just get one or the other, and obviously that adds the ventilated front seats and the leather. You can get the technology package, which adds wireless phone charging, rain sensing wipers, a rear camera mirror, and interior ambient lighting. Although interestingly, the rain sensor for the automatic wipers is optional on RS, but the rest of those features are standard on the RS trim. You also have the Super Cruise package, which has to be bought in conjunction with the technology package, as you can see right there, because then it will add both of those at once. And obviously that adds Super Cruise, it adds front parking sensors and some other features, such as driver attention assist and other features like that. You have the dual panel sunroof package, which you have to get the technology package in conjunction with to get. That adds the gloss black roof rails that are standard on the RS trim and the dual panel power sunroof. And you obviously have some other packages like all-weather floor mats and DC fast charging accessories. You do have the illuminated charge port light, which is the most overpriced option on this vehicle at $450, and some other small things in here that you can spec as well. Let's talk about the exterior color options. So you can get the Marina Blue Metallic, Relic Green, Habanero Orange, Summit White, Mosaic Black, which is the color that I had on my test vehicle, and Sterling Gray Metallic. And the RS trim, I believe, has the exact same color options. I'll check that. I was wrong. It does not have the option of Relic Green, but it adds the option of Atomic Yellow, which is kind of like a nitro yellow similar color, and that actually looks pretty cool. But if you were to ask me, I prefer the Relic Green on the LT trim. And if you were to ask me how I would spec my Bolt, I would go with the LT trim in Relic Green with the comfort package only. And the reason why I would do comfort package only is because you can get these vehicles for exceptionally low prices. Here is an example of the exact one that I just spec'd out for $23,300 before tax, title, license. And for a brand new electric car, that is exceptionally cheap. So if you're looking for a second or third vehicle, or heck, even maybe a primary vehicle for someone who doesn't drive a whole lot, this is going to be a fantastic budget electric option. And for the features that you get and the price point that these are going for, this is the best value new electric car. I know I said that the Equinox EV in my previous review was the best value EV, but if you compare MSRP, the Equinox EV is better value. But if you compare the actual sale price, the Bolt is unbeatable value.
So that was a thorough overview of the pricing and trim levels on the Chevy Bolt, and I think it's fair to say that the value proposition here is unbeatable. For 23 grand from certain dealers, and let's just say more realistically 25 grand, the base model LT trim, with what it offers the same battery pack, the same drive unit, the same space, and the same base technology as this RS trim. For 25 grand for a brand new EV without incentives, keep that in mind, that is unbeatable value. Anyway, let's take this thing out on the road and see how it drives. All right, let's take the 2027 Chevy Bolt for a spin, shall we? Hopping inside, vehicle automatically starts up. Open the garage door, put it into drive, and we're off. I'm gonna put the vehicle into normal mode to start out. Pulling out of the garage, pretty good pep right there, a little bit of wheel slip. Close the garage door. All right, let's see how the 2027 Chevy Bolt drives. So far on the gravel driveway, NVH actually seems pretty decent. I'm gonna turn the climate control up, and this thing is, GM has the best aircon in the business. Tell me whatever you want, GM has the best AC out of any new car. Actually, that's a little too much. GM always nails AC. Let's pull out onto the road. Turn signal sound, pretty decent, pretty quiet. Same as other GM vehicles. Pulling out onto the main road, giving it some acceleration. Definitely ramped into the power pretty linearly there. Doesn't give you full beanage right off the bat in normal mode. Let's put it into sport mode and check it into this corner. A little bit
of inside wheel slip from that right front wheel. I can't speak. There we go. Pretty good acceleration, 70. Let's see if we can hit 93 mile an hour top speed. There you go, speed limited to 93 mile an hour. Honestly, that seems pretty quick enough. I don't think you really need to go faster than 93 miles an hour, but it is a little bit limiting if you're trying to pass someone and they accelerate while you're passing them. Might not be the best thing to only have a 93 mile an hour top speed. It gets the job done. Road noise at 71 miles an hour. Actually pretty quiet, not going to lie, for the price point. It's not the quietest thing in the world. There is a little bit more tire noise than the Chevy Equinox EV. But other than that, it's pretty comparable in here, other than maybe seat comfort. The seats are a little bit narrower in the Bolt, and they're a little bit firmer, so not the most comfortable thing for long trips, but it's perfectly acceptable for the price point. The speed limit sign recognition does work incredibly well. The speed limit dropped to 55 back there, and it picked up on it instantly. And this does have adaptive cruise control, so let's try that out. Set. 57 miles an hour. And a nice feature that this adaptive cruise system does offer is it will adapt to speed limits if you enable that in the settings menu. So if the speed limit increases, it will increase your speed. If it decreases, it will decrease your speed. And it will maintain your offset. So if you were going 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, it will continue to go 2 miles an hour over the new speed limit, which is nice. At 55 miles an hour, pretty minimal road noise. The NVH is good. Ride quality is on the firmer side, but also pretty comfortable too. It's not going to beat you up, but it is sporty enough to make this actually pretty fun to drive. We'll see that when we get into the twistier stuff. Let's pull into this gas station here and test out the turning radius. So I'm gonna go all the way to the edge of the road here, and I'm gonna crank the wheel and see what the turning radius on the Bolt is like. So full crank on the wheel. And for being front-wheel drive, that is a very tight turning circle. Great job, GM, on the turning circle there. Although, to be fair, for a small vehicle, that's not that impressive, but it still is a good turning circle overall. A little bit of wheel spin pulling out of there. That was full throttle, by the way. This thing actually has a lot more acceleration than the Equinox EV, even though it has less power and less torque. But it does weigh like 1,200 pounds less than the Equinox EV, so that could explain the reason for the increased accelerative ability of the Bolt. That's full acceleration. Up to 171 kilowatts I saw on the dash. Pretty good acceleration there. On the bridge, you can hear some tire noise. It's not bad at all though, perfectly acceptable. Let's put the vehicle into my mode. And I have my mode configured to have steering on normal, brake feel on normal, acceleration in sport. We'll check it around some bends here, see what the brake pedal feel is like. And the regen in this car is strong enough to the point where you actually don't even really need to use the brake pedal in this vehicle. And it does have blended braking. So when you put your foot on the brake pedal, it'll apply regen before friction brakes to improve efficiency around town if you don't use one pedal driving. So you don't really miss out on much in terms of range. On power throughout the corner. Actually pretty stable. That took that corner really well. This thing is actually surprisingly engaging. Let's disable traction control just for funsies. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference, but oh, I'm actually going too fast to disable ESC, so I'll just turn traction control off. You can't turn ESC off, I believe, over 30 miles an hour. All right, 42 miles an hour into the corner. Actually pretty good handling. On power. On the brakes. Brake pedal is pretty touchy, even on the normal setting. On the sport setting, it's even more touchy, but it honestly does make this feel a lot sportier than a lot of other GM's offerings. Even their Trailblazer or something of a similar size is not this sporty and engaging to drive. That torsion beam rear axle does make it pretty stiff over undulations in the road, but it keeps the body roll to a minimum, and considering the narrow width of the vehicle, that's a good thing, because narrower cars typically tend to body roll more in the corners with the same suspension setup as a wider car, just because, you know, it's taller relative to its width. Even though this is a fairly narrow vehicle, there's not a lot of body roll due to that torsion beam rear end. Pushing the limit of grip there. The 215s are a little bit narrow and they are an efficiency focused tire, but the grip is there throughout the corner, and honestly, if you put this car on a stickier tire, this would be a hoot on an autocross track. For the price, it drives great. It drives great, and the power is there. It's not fast, like, it's not blow the doors off like a muscle car quick, but you know, it's faster than I think most people realize these little cars are. You know what, let's just go straight.
traction through the corner. Fantastic grip. I mean, I was going like 65 mile an hour, and for 215 with tires, that's actually pretty good. I'm actually really impressed with this car. I would 100% buy one if I was in the market for a new electric car. Maybe not as my primary vehicle because it's a little on the small side, but if you can get past the small size, this is great for a grocery getter or for a teen to drive around, or maybe for an older person. This has enough range, great charging, like fantastic charging curve. I don't want to seem like I'm throwing GM a bone here when it comes to the Bolt, but I just love this car. And to be honest, I prefer it to the Equinox EV. Even though the Equinox does have a lot more range, it has like 60 to 70 miles more range than the Bolt. But to be honest, I don't really think it's worth it. I mean, it's $8,000 more for a base Equinox compared to this, and the range per dollar is basically the same between the two, so you just basically pick which one fits your needs better and pick which one you can actually afford. Both the Equinox and the Bolt are great vehicles. I've driven both of them. I like both of them, but this one appeals to me purely because it's just more fun to drive. It just really is. Like, you put your foot down and you actually have decent pickup and power for a front drive electric car. Here we are on a rougher road surface, and I will say the NVH is not the best, but for the price point, it's fine. There's a little bit of rattling coming from the seatbelt adjuster, but honestly, that's typical for most vehicles driving on this road surface. It's pretty textured and aggressive, so it's to be expected. We'll check the Bolt into this corner. This is a little bit more of a loose surface, and we'll see how the 215/50 R17 Michelin E Primacies get this 3,800,000 pound, not 3,800,000 pound, 3,800 pound Bolt around this corner. Well, that guy was over the line. That actually was pretty good right there. Despite the tire squeal going around, it held its line pretty good. It's great. I love it. I love this car. It's just, I mean, it's really fun to just dart around town in. The only thing is that the build quality I have noticed is not as good as the Equinox EV. There's a little more rattles in here. Not anything that you wouldn't expect at this price point, but you know, it's not a Maybach. It's not a luxurious car, but for 30 grand, which is basically what you can get this RS trim for, what a steal of a deal, to be honest. This road is actually so coarse to the point where I avoid it at all costs. It's great for these drive test videos to test the NVH in the car, and I will say the tire noise is acceptable. The rattles are a little bit more than an average vehicle, but then again, most vehicles, when you drive down this road once, will develop a rattle from somewhere that wasn't there before, and that's why I try to avoid it in my cars, because it loosens up a lot of the interior paneling. This car is not doing too bad when it comes to NVH on this particular road, but it's also not perfect, and I wasn't expecting it to be. Up here we have a train track. We'll hit it at roughly 60 miles an hour and see how it feels going over the bump. 3, 2, 1. Not too bad. That's a pretty aggressive train track, and it handled it pretty well. Definitely on the stiffer side when it comes to suspension tuning, but it's not bad at all. It handled that pretty well, and it did not upset the car. It didn't like swerve around when I hit that. It handled it pretty well. It stayed straight. Test the throttle response off the line. A little bit of torque steer there. This does have an open differential, so it's going to have some inside wheel spin on the wheel that you're turning towards. So if you're turning left, you're going to have left wheel slip. That's not unusual for electric cars. In fact, basically no new electric cars have a limited slip differential. And for this price point, I would not expect one. Don't get me wrong about that. But, you know, that is something to note. You're going to get inside wheel slip, say that 5 times fast, on a front wheel drive electric car when you're coming out of a corner. Let's put it into, we'll go my mode, but we'll also put the acceleration feel into relaxed mode. Okay, it did definitely back off the throttle pedal a lot. Oh yeah. Same peak power, but it rolls into it very gently. At low speeds and on a smooth road, NVH is great, exactly as I would expect. Nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, it might be a little bit quieter than like a Chevy Trax, for example, just because there's no engine under the hood. And to be fair, the Chevy Trax has a fairly quiet powertrain. It's only like a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder in that thing. Put it back into sport mode. If you live in a city and you want an EV, buy this. Don't even consider the Fiat 500e. Don't consider the Mini Cooper SE. They don't make the Smart 4.2 EQ, so that's out of the question. Like, just buy the Bolt.
Let's check our efficiency over the last couple miles. 2.2 miles per kilowatt hour. That's actually pretty bad, but we've been hammering on it the whole time. And in the city, I have seen around 3.5 to 4 miles per kilowatt hour out of the new Bolt. This right here is a pretty off-camber situation. Just testing the articulation of the rear suspension. Actually not too bad. This is a pretty steep driveway entrance, so that's a pretty good test point just to see what the rear suspension articulation is like. And it's enough. It's not like a 4Runner or anything crazy. Usually this scenario is kind of where torsion beam rear suspension suffers a little, but honestly, I don't think it's too bad on this car. Did feel the rear wheel, it got a little light. It didn't come off the ground, but it got a little light. Doesn't have a ton of articulation, but it's a Bolt. It's not a rock crawler, so it doesn't really matter to me. Can I say some negative things about it? I will say my range test was a little underwhelming. I got roughly, let's just say 200 miles. I had about 2% left, and it was very windy, and by very I mean about 13 to 15 mile an hour wind. And it was kind of a crosswind, so it couldn't really be counteracted. And it was also hot. But 200 miles in the modern day is not a ton of range, considering that the Equinox EV in fairly similar conditions got nearly 70 miles more range. But then again, it also has a significantly larger battery pack, and the efficiency between the Bolt and the Equinox was actually fairly similar, and the Bolt was in a little bit worse conditions than that car. So I think it's safe to say that the difference might not be 70 miles, but in the real world, the difference is at least 55 to 60 miles of highway range, and that is significant. Anyway, that's going to be the end of the driving review of the Chevy Bolt. Handles shockingly well. It is super fun to drive. NVH, a little bit below average, I would say, but totally acceptable for the price. The comfort in here is not the best. The suspension is fine, but the seat is a little bit firm, and the AC works great, so that is nice to see, and the technology's good. The range is decent. The charging is fantastic. Overall, I can't say enough good things about this car. I don't want to seem like I'm a GM stooge, but they just make a really good car, and it makes me sad that they're going to kill it off within the next year. So get it while you can. Anyway, let's cut back to the studio and give you guys my final thoughts.
All right, that was my impressions of driving the 2027 Bolt, and it is actually surprisingly fun to drive. It has tons of low-end torque, the acceleration is pretty good, and it handles pretty well in the corners despite being a crossover SUV, although to me this is honestly more like a lifted hatchback. Overall, my total review of this car is excellent. I love this car. If I had 25 grand and I needed a second or third vehicle in my household, I would immediately go and buy one of these, and especially because they're gonna discontinue it in about 12 months from now, get it while you can, because this thing is great, and I would highly recommend it to anyone looking for a budget electric car. Even if you're looking at a used electric car, this thing is such good value that it can compete with some of the used EVs on the market. Think used Model Y, Subaru Solterra, Hyundai Ioniq 5. If you're looking at a used version of that, for a similar price, you can get a brand new Bolt, and it'll charge just as well as those vehicles. It will have maybe a little bit less range, but the software will be more up to date, and I think the styling and the cohesiveness of the whole package works really well here. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this review. Comment down below what you guys think of the 2027 Bolt, and I'll see you in the next video.